So, about a month ago, Tyler Reddick announced that he would be joining 23XI Racing. Not this year, not next year, but the year after that. It's definitely gotten a lot of people talking since, and the biggest talking point is how much friction there will be between Reddick and RC. Since the announcement, he's gotten a pole and kissed the bricks of Indianapolis, so it's safe to say that what Tyler Reddick has said, which is that he's 100% focused on winning a championship with RCR, is true. But all of this has gotten me thinking, what other times in NASCAR history has a driver basically undergone a lame duck period of time, where they signed with another team, or were rumored to join another team, or had discussions with another team while the season was still going on, and they were still under their current contract? So, let's get into it. The first one is a pretty recent one that I'm sure you'll remember vividly, and that's Brad Keselowski to Roush Fenway Racing, now called RFK Racing. This was by far the worst kept secret in the garage last year, and was rumored for months on end before an official announcement was made. We don't know when discussions began, but it's safe to say that things were pretty awkward in the Team Penske camp for a while. Keselowski wanted to leave the team at the end of 2020, but seeing no other competitive option, he begrudgingly agreed to a one-year deal for 2021. The fact that almost everyone from fans to media insiders knew Keselowski wanted to leave Team Penske as soon as an opening was in sight was sure to cause some abrasion. And when those RFK rumors started swirling, you knew that was going to be further exacerbated. Throughout the year, you could tell that Keselowski seemed distracted and didn't seem that confident and committed to his team. He bulldozed his teammate in the Daytona 500, no fault of his own, and after the first 9 races, he was really inconsistent. Yeah, he got that win at Talladega, but excluding that race, Pocono where he led the most laps, in New Hampshire, it didn't seem like he had much speed at all. I mentioned inconsistency, and that was pretty much his entire regular season in a nutshell. For every top 10 or top 5, he'd follow it up by finishing in the teens or the 20s. He did turn up the wick in the playoffs, and closed his time out finishing 6th in points, with 10 top 5s and 17 top 10s. But the most alarming stat is his average finish, which was a pretty disappointing 13th. Then you have Matt Kenseth signing with JGR while still at Roush. The Wisconsin native drove for the Cat in the Hat for 13 consecutive seasons, winning 2 Daytona 500s and a championship. He had loads of incredible drives, and really made a name for himself in the Cup Series. But all good things must come to an end, and in early September, a bombshell was dropped. Kenseth would be leaving Roush and joining Joe Gibbs Racing in 2013. You want to talk about timing? Well, this was timed pretty poorly, as the chase for the championship was just beginning. There were many questions as to whether Kenseth would do well in the chase, whether Roush would give him good equipment, etc. The first race of the chase got people even more worried after Kenseth finished a distant 18th at Chicagoland and sat 11th in points, with Jeff Gordon the only driver behind him. New Hampshire was more of the same, finishing 14th. And as if things couldn't get any worse, we head to Dover.
Down. When this happened?
Yeah, when that track bar breaks, the only thing that holds the rear end in the center of the car is the fender. You can see that left rear tire got against the fender.
Dover seemingly eliminated Kenseth's chances of winning the championship, and salvaging what looked to be a pretty solid campaign. Not even the win the next week at Talladega improved their points position. If anything, it made things more awkward. By this point in time, most people had written Kenseth's season off. Just get to the end and it'll all be over. But Kenseth wasn't going to give up. Chaos ensued in front of him as Kenseth remained as consistent as he ever was. He scored another win at Kansas and then rallied to a top 5 at Texas. By the end of the year, Kenseth sat 7th in points. A monstrous effort for a lame duck period of time. Then you have to look at possibly the biggest silly season bomb dropped in probably the history of NASCAR. Dale Earnhardt Jr. leaving DEI. Tensions between Dale Earnhardt Jr. and stepmother Teresa were publicly documented and have been talked about in greater detail since then by people like Ty Norris and Tony Uri Jr. Not just tensions between Teresa and Dale, but between Teresa and, well, everybody. So when Jr. announced that he'd be leaving his dad's operation that had gone to rot, you knew that Teresa would basically rain down fire and fury. The months after the announcement, Jr.'s performance tanked. He had 2 crashes late in the year to add to his Daytona 500 crash, and 4, count them, 4 engine-related DNFs to add to the 6 total that year. There were a few bright spots on the year. There were 7 top 5s and 12 top 10s, but these numbers are certainly not indicative of the talent Jr. has. His average finish was 18.6, which was significantly lower than any of his previous seasons with the DEI, large in part due to those 9 DNFs I talked about. He did get a pole at Pocono, which was really the only track DEI showed any amount of raw speed in their dying days. All in all, it was a terrible year for all involved, and an awkward year at that. Now, let's go back a year and talk about Brian Vickers' 2006 season. In the summer of that year, Vickers announced that he would be joining Red Bull Racing and Toyota the following season. This was an unpopular move by many fans, as you have to remember there was a lot of uproar when Toyota first came into the sport because they were a foreign manufacturer, And it didn't help the fans when he announced that he'd be leaving one of the most popular teams at the time. Except for winning the 2003 Busch Series championship, Vickers didn't really do anything notable at Hendrick. He finished 25th in points in his first full-time season in 2004, 17th in 2005, and 15th in 2006. In that 2006 season, he scored 5 top 5s, 9 top 10s, and a pole. He also scored a win. Now, normally I'd say that was a pretty good way to salvage his time at Hendrick, and basically remind Rick of the potential talent he'll be missing out on. And while the win itself was a huge highlight, how he won was a huge lowlight.
Vickers wants to go. Eight getting a little wider.
There he goes.
Junior.
Oh, no!
Vickers hits the 48.
The 48 and takes out Earnhardt and Jimmy Johnson.
Caution is out. The leaders had already taken the white flag.
Wrecking your teammate and the most popular driver in NASCAR all in one go is definitely not going to bolster your public image. Not only that, but wrecking 2 drivers that were in contention to win the championship at the time. On top of that, many thought that Kasey Kahne, who was pretty popular at the time, won the race. So many felt Vickers stole a win by 3 popular drivers and teams. While he would clean up his image for a time and prove his worth at Red Bull Racing, it's safe to say the low point of his career was towards the end of 2006. Now, I know we're jumping all over the place here, but let's go forward about a decade to Alex Bowman coming into the Cup Series. After spending a year at BK Racing doing what they do best, and another year in backmarker equipment at Tommy Baldwin Racing, riding around in the back and missing the Daytona 500, Bowman was at a crossroads in his career. He had the talent. In his first 2 and only 2 ARCA starts of 2011, he won. And bear in mind, he was 18. He finished 4th in the 2012 ARCA season and pushed the RAB racing equipment to its absolute limit in 2013, finishing 11th in the Nationwide Series points. This was enough for Dale Jr. to put him in the car at Dover in 2016, and he'd finish 3rd. Every time he was put in that 88 car, he would show genuine speed. With Jr. out for the rest of the season in the Cup Series due to a concussion, Bowman was called up to drive the 88 car, and this unknown kid from Tucson, Arizona, plopped the thing onto the top of the qualifying sheet at Phoenix and took the other 39 drivers to school. It was apparent that Bowman would be driving for Hendrick Motorsports sometime in the future. Not just the team he would be driving for, but the car. Dale Jr. announced that 2017 would be his final season, and he would go out under the slogan, Appreciation. Fans would have one last chance to have their memorabilia signed by Earnhardt, and one last chance to see him at their home track, at least in Cup. After 2017, the plan was apparent. Bowman would replace him for 2018. But what would he do in 2017? Well, Rick Hendrick stuck him in the simulator for a year. Bowman later recalled that as one of the worst experiences of his life. Perhaps he meant that sarcastically, but still. He'd rather touch real tarmac than drive over the virtual one. He would make some real-life appearances that year, finishing 6th for GMS Racing, and in his first Xfinity start in well over a year, he won. All of this proved that he was more than ready to drive for HMS beyond 2017. While 2016 might have been a good year for Alex Bowman, it was the exact opposite for Clint Bowyer. At the beginning of 2016, Tony Stewart announced that year would be his final year of Cup competition. And just to shut down the rumor mill and seal off any distractions, he signed his replacement at the end of 2015 for 2017. That replacement being Clint Bowyer. Bowyer was still under contract with MWR through 2016. However, MWR would shut down after 2015, which meant that whoever they sold the 15 car to is who Bowyer would drive for. Unfortunately, this meant that Bowyer would undergo the epitome of a lame duck year, driving for H. Scott Motorsports full-time that season. The year was pretty forgettable for the Kansan, but hey, at least he had something to look forward to. This poses another question though. What if you were looking forward to something, but that something would have to be postponed? Well, question not, because history will tell us the answer to this. At the beginning of 2005, Mark Martin announced that he would be cutting back from full-time Cup Series competition after that season, and in honor of his loyal followers, he dubbed that year as a Salute to Your Tour, as a thank you to his fans. Things were going to plan. In June of 2005, Mark's replacement was announced as Jamie McMurray. However, things took a turn for the worst, as Kurt Busch was arrested towards the end of the season and subsequently fired from the organization. McMurray would instead drive the 97 car in 2006, which would later be renumbered. Jack Roush needed another year to find a replacement, as all of this transpired late in the silly season game. Thus, Mark Martin's plans to retire changed, and what would ultimately follow is another solid campaign in 2006, finishing 9th in points, which in turn would open Pandora's box. Mark may have wanted out at the end of 2005, but he would end up leaving at the end of 2013. And then there's Kasey Kahne's 2011 season, which is sort of relatable to Tyler Reddick's current situation. The difference being that Kahne would drive for 3 completely different organizations in 3 consecutive seasons of Cup competition. Kasey Kahne had driven for Evernham Motorsports since 2004, and that was really the only team he considered home. However, in April of 2010, it was announced that Kahne would drive for Hendrick Motorsports at the beginning of 2012 and replace Mark Martin in the 5. A lot of people were shocked at the announcement for a number of reasons. This was a year and a half from the announcement, and also, HMS was a Chevy team, while Evernham, who was called Richard Petty Motorsports at the time, was a Dodge team. The lame duck period of time between April of 2010 and February of 2012 was going to be awkward for all parties involved. But things get even stranger later into the year. After the fall Charlotte race, Kahne is released from his Evernham contract and spends the remainder of the season driving for Red Bull Racing. In 2011, he'll drive for the team on a full-time basis. At the time, there were rumors swirling that Kahne could join a Hendrick affiliate, maybe a team like Stewart-Haas. But to bridge the gap towards 2012, he would be driving for Toyota. Despite the dark cloud looming over Kahne for months on end, his performance didn't dip too significantly. In 2010, he scored 7 top 5s and 10 top 10s, and in 2011, he scored 8 top 5s, 15 top 10s, as well as a win at Phoenix. All of this certainly made Rick Hendrick realize that he was going to be tapping a solid driver to wheel the 5, and that car was going to be in good hands for the years to come. Well, we've talked a lot about awkward NASCAR contracts in the 21st century, and there's an argument to be had that that's large in part due to the politicization and rapid evolution of NASCAR from a sport where good old boys were just there to drive the fastest team on the grid, to a sport where million-dollar contracts, salaries, and debacles are bound to occur. It's just part of the growth of a sport. However, there is one interesting scenario that occurred in the early 1980s that I can't omit, and that's Dale Earnhardt's 2 seasons with Budmore Engineering in 1982 and 1983. Now, things are a bit more awkward from the retrospective lens, but even at the time, there was a tinge of awkwardness. But let's backtrack a bit. 16 races into the 1981 season, Rod Osterlund sold his team to J.D. Stacy. But after 4 weeks, the relationship severed, and Earnhardt defected to Richard Childress Racing to drive the 3 car. One might think that naturally the two of them would continue their relationship into 1982, but not so. Taking Richard Childress' suggestion that Dale should go to Budmore into account, Earnhardt spent 2 seasons at the organization, scoring 3 wins in the process, before returning back to RCR. Earnhardt and Childress were friends in that 1982 and 1983 season, and probably wanted to work together in those years, but Ricky Rudd had signed a contract to drive for RC in those seasons, postponing the 67 wins and 6 championships that would ensue beginning in 1984. Now, while Kahne's situation might have been similar to Reddick's, Kevin Harvick's contract situation exactly a decade ago is almost a carbon-cut copy of what we have today. Kevin Harvick stepped into big shoes when he joined the Cup Series, as the passing of Dale Earnhardt penned an immediate replacement. Throughout his time at RCR, Harvick was a B-tier driver at best, occasionally sneaking into the championship conversation, like he did in 2006 and like he did in 2010. There were some years when he was a no-show, but for the most part, RCR proved to be a stable home for the Californian. However, towards the end of 2012, Kevin Harvick announced that he would be leaving the organization and moved to Stewart-Haas Racing beginning in 2014. The team banded together and remained focused on finishing out their time. However, there was some friction here and there. Harvick has been interviewed since then and has talked about the tension in competition meetings, just all-around tension in the team shop. Not to mention that towards the end of 2012, he had some choice words to say about the Dillon brothers.
3 just dumped me. Exactly the reason why I'm leaving RCR, because you got those kids coming up and they got no respect for what they do in this sport, and they've had everything fed to them with a spoon. So I cut him slack all day, and he just dive bombs me in there, dumps me. So just got to thank all these Anderson Syrup guys for everything that they do. It's a shame you got to get taken out by some rich kid like that.
On track, however, you could tell that the 29 team was still pretty motivated. Immediately after the announcement, Harvick silenced the doubters and broke a winless streak at Phoenix that had been looming over him all year. At the end of the year, he had 5 top 5s and 14 top 10s, and in 2013, he would get 4 wins, 9 top 5s, and 21 top 10s, and was in contention to win the title. He would ultimately finish 3rd, which is pretty impressive all things considered. So, with that being said, what do you make of these awkward contract situations? Are there some that you remember well, or some that you don't? Are there ones not even mentioned in the video? Let me know down in the comment section below, and until next time, this has been the news. I'll see you.